Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's so good to see you all here. Thank you, everyone, for chatting where you're from. I'm excited to see some new folks here and some returning guests. I'm Shannon Farley. I'm a co-founder of Fast Forward. Welcome to Fast Forward's Academy. Today, I am so excited that we're going to be talking to Kristina Joye Lyles. We call her Steen from DonorsChoose on how you can raise more money using the tools you already have. This topic is really important to so many of you out there. In fact, for our accelerator alumni, it's the thing that keeps most people up at night. So we hope that you leave here with tips and tricks to go further your impactful missions. First, a little bit about Fast Forward. We believe the best tech should be applied to our biggest social problems. That's why we founded an accelerator exclusively for tech nonprofits. 59 tech nonprofits have graduated from our program, and they've gone on to raise over $275 million and impact over 88 million lives. We just closed the applications for this year's accelerator, but if you're an amazing tech nonprofit and you're just hearing about us for the first time, don't worry, ping us, we'll help you out. We also, as you know, launched this free academy. We're halfway through it. We have more great content coming in the weeks to come, so please stay with us. Before we get started, I want to thank our partners, without whom none of this would have been possible. eBay Foundation, and today in particular, Comcast Business. We've been partnering with Comcast Business since 2016. They've been an amazing partner. Comcast shares our commitment to empowering underserved entrepreneurs to build a stronger, more inclusive world. We'd also like to thank our sustaining premier partners, Google.org, BlackRock, HPE Foundation, Twilio.org, GM, and Okta. And we're really, really lucky today because we have one of my favorite humans, Lorena Hernandez, to kick us off. She's the California Director of Community Impact at Comcast. Welcome, Lorena. It's so good to see you.
Thank you, Shannon. And hello to everyone here. I'm thrilled to be here among the social entrepreneurs using tech to make the world a better place. Comcast is focused on enriching our communities with technology. And one of those ways that we achieve this is through Internet Essentials. Just last week, we announced that we connected 10 million low-income individuals to the power of the internet. And that was over the course of a decade. And we also announced that in the next 10 years, we will be investing $1 billion to impact 50 million more individuals. Another way is through our community partners, which enable community support at scale. And that brings us to Fast Forward. Across issue areas from education to closing the digital divide, we know that no single organization can solve the big problems our world faces. And we definitely know that because we've been working, as I mentioned, on Internet Essentials for over a decade. And achieving the milestone that we did last week, we didn't do it alone. It really does take a village. But just want to talk about, the two important factors that can get us to solutions faster is using technology and working together. And Fast Forward shares this belief. And that's why we've supported Fast Forward since 2016. I'm also excited to be kicking off today's class with your amazing, amazing instructor, Kristina Joye Lyles, who is, really going to focus on fundraising. And we know that that is so important, especially in this day and age. And then at, DonorsChoose, she is the head of equity and impact, which means she is focused on making sure more of our nation's students are connected to the resources they need to succeed. And I'm excited to have her join us today. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Shannon to share more.
Thank you so much, Lorena, and thank you for making today's session possible. Before we get started, Steen is the main show and she's amazing. I just wanted to set some norms for the class. This is being recorded. Thank you to all of you who asked us to record it and share it. So that's happening. We will share it on our YouTube channel after the session. Please stay on mute when you're not speaking. There are plenty of opportunities for question and answer, and you can do that during the question and answer period, or if something comes up that Steen says inspires a question, please use the raise your hand feature, which is right in the reactions button at the bottom of Zoom. If you don't have that feature, please, you can put it in the chat. Yeah, and don't hesitate to share your experience with us and Steen on social. We have our tags there. All right, are you all ready? This is gonna be a good one. Okay. Today's teacher, I'm so excited that you get to meet her. Her name is Kristina Joye Lyles. Steen is the head of equity and impact and senior partnerships director at DonorsChoose, a tech nonprofit that makes it easy for anyone to help a teacher in need. To date, DonorsChoose has funded over 1.9 million projects and raised over $1 billion for teachers and students. In her role, Steen develops and manages partnerships with companies, foundations, and individual philanthropists. So she's really seen it all. Steen also leads DonorsChoose efforts to incorporate a race and equity lens, forward lens in supporting students and teachers across the country. I'm so excited that you're here today. Welcome, Steen.
Thanks for having me. I could talk about fundraising and equity all day. Y'all are gonna have to stop me, I think, at the end of the question and answer so that I can just keep going and going. So thank y'all for having me. It's truly a treat.
You know, I'm so excited that you said that because not everybody wants to talk about fundraising all the time or is that excited about fundraising. So can you tell me a little bit, we read your background, but like, how did you get on this path? How did you become a fundraiser who loves fundraising?
I mean, well, I'd like to say that I just fell into it, but I do think it's something that I've loved to do even before I knew it was a career, if that makes sense. So by way of background, I'm a corporate lawyer by trade, go Hoyas. And I practiced corporate law in total for a bit under 5 years at a few different law firms. And when I think about what I liked the most about the law, it was really the business development aspect of bringing on new clients and supporting them and their goals. That was the most exciting for me. And I think back to when I was a summer associate and when I was a junior associate at some of the firms that I worked at, I used to remember sitting on the business development committees and just enjoying that aspect of the work a lot and just watching our partners in action. And so I think just having an eye toward the nuance and the complexity of connecting the business to clients is something that I really do love. And I'll share one other thing, Shannon, which is just that, that's kind of how I fell into the path. But when I think about why the path is right for me, I truly am enamored by fundraising, especially in this nonprofit sector, in the social good space. I have a deep respect for the communities that we're serving through DonorsChoose. I don't consider myself divorced from, right, the communities that we're serving, and the ability to connect the funding and the resources to the communities is just like, it feels like my life's work to sort of bridge these communities. So given where we are as a country right now, where so many eyes are on social good, I think it's a really good time to be a fundraiser.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, especially because often we hear from new fundraisers in particular that they find fundraising to be like kind of icky. Asking for something, even if it's for your community that desperately needs support, it can feel a little icky. I'm wondering, like, how, as a new fundraiser and now as a super seasoned fundraiser, how did you navigate the ick?
So there's a lot there, right? I mean, I think there's one thing that's important, and I think about identity a lot in fundraising, right? And so one thing that's really important that we think about a lot as our team at DonorsChoose is to name the way that identity is showing up in fundraising. And just to take one, let me take one giant step back. I appreciate that you shared a bit about DonorsChoose, but I'll give a little bit more context into the partnership landscape at DonorsChoose, just so folks have a sense of what I'm saying, partner or donor or funder, what that means in our marketplace. So as Shannon mentioned, and as Lorena so wonderfully mentioned, at DonorsChoose, our mission is to ensure that students have access to the resources that they need to learn, right? So we believe that a kid's zip code should not determine whether or not they get access to books or art supplies or colored pencils or field trips. And what happens is teachers on DonorsChoose request the resources that they need to learn by creating these projects on our site. And then our funders come to our site to donate and to make those classroom dreams a reality. So Shannon, we would come to your classroom project and we'd fund your project. And our funders sit in two different camps though, right? We have our funders who come to our website directly and they find projects that interest them. We call these our donors. And then we also have, in another camp, our partners who come to us with goals to support classrooms. So these are our companies, foundations, individual philanthropists making large gifts. And we work with our partners to create campaigns and initiatives. And that is where you'll hear me talk a bit more today, is in that latter camp of partners or funders. But I'll mention that our revenue at DonorsChoose comes from 50% donors, so folks on the website, and then 50% folks who are partners. So that was a very lengthy way of saying I'm mentioning partners as that latter camp in terms of my fundraising and our work with our funders. But to this question of ick, there is a bit of ick, right? I think any of us on this call could say, we'll get on a call with a funder, and in that moment, we're recognizing a power dynamic happen, right? We're asking for money. And I think every funder understands that we are indeed asking for money. And there's a bit of a identity barrier that I think can happen even in the instance of asking for dollars. And there are a couple of things that I think are sort of top of mind when it comes to removing the ick. And I'll just name two. I think the first is, despite my personal connection and affinity to this work, right? I was once a public school student, a Black girl in class K through 12, right, in public schools. But despite my personal connection, I also like to depersonalize the ask, but still keep the passion behind it. And what I'm trying to remember in these conversations with funders is that I am not asking them to put money in my bank account. And depending on the funder, if it's an individual funder, it's different. They are not putting money from their account either. And so I said, we talk a lot about DonorsChoose, about making our particular ask sort of rooted in passion by saying things like, here's what's amazing about what's happening here. How exciting that we're on the same page about this mission. Let's talk together about our shared goals, and removing for a moment that level of ick, which is, oh, by the way, we're really here to talk about a $50,000 gift to classrooms. And Shannon, I'll share one other note just around the power dynamic, which is, I think when it comes to the power dynamic in fundraising, there are questions of identity that show up. What's really critical, I think, is that we name it and understand that those power dynamics are happening. And I don't think that it's something unique to the fundraiser to note that we're there to talk about what is an uneven dynamic from the get-go. So we can talk more about that if it's top of mind for folks on the call, but I just want to name the ick is there.
I really appreciate that. And at DonorsChoose, you've chosen to follow one really interesting strategy. Can you tell us a little bit more about the I See Me campaign and how you're thinking about identity and equity in your fundraising pipeline?
Yeah, okay, so I'd love to. I See Me, I can't see everyone's faces. There are a number of us here. And if you're adept at playing with tabs, I hope while I'm talking, you'll go to DonorsChoose.org/I See Me to get a little more color as to the campaign itself. But what I See Me is it was our organization's first ever intentionally race forward initiative that says this, right? It says that students should see themselves reflected in their resources and in their learning environments. And that's because, right, research tells us that when students have access to books and materials that are affirming their own identity, they do better academically. And the same then goes, for example, Black students having at least one Black teacher. The research is compelling, suggesting the academic benefits of that. But the origin story, sort of looping this back to fundraising in our conversation, is that this initiative, which is about truly bringing millions of dollars of resources into classrooms, is rooted in my own story, right, of growing up in public schools. And probably more than 100 different pitch conversations about I See Me, I started nearly every single one of them discussing how, as a military brat who attended public schools her whole life, K through 12, I had less than a handful, right, of Black teachers my entire experience. And I remember what it felt like to not see myself represented in my teachers, or to read books that were not featuring protagonists that looked like me. So it was that identity story, it was leaning into that I think fueled what was a campaign and initiative that was central to how we were thinking about getting beyond the pitch, getting beyond the conversation of the ask of millions of dollars, and instead saying, here's why this matters, and here's the personal why rooted in this conversation.
I think that's so critical. We often, we don't always think about equity within our own donor pipelines. And one of the reasons it's so important is in part because, like, as we show up with our identity, that comes with us as we fundraise. So I'm interested in hearing, one of the things about the tech nonprofit space is we have far more diverse founders in our space than we have seen in other tech spaces. And we know anecdotally that founders of color and women founders raise less money than their male counterparts typically. And sometimes that's because they ask for less. But sometimes it's because of other things. So I'm interested in, as a woman of color who is fundraising, how have you navigated some of those other pieces of identity when you're straight up asking for money?
Oh, that's a whole thing, isn't it, Shannon? I mean, gosh, we could have a whole conversation just on that. And I just want to, again, I can't see all of your faces, but I do just want to give a special hello to all of us on the call here. And then a special minute of gratitude to fellow women of color fundraisers. I think there's a whole niche of work that's happening in that space today. So going back to something I shared a second ago, I think naming what's happening is important. And something that I used to read a lot about is if folks watch the show Jeopardy, there are these conversations that are these studies that discuss whether or not, despite getting the answer equally as right as males on the show, women on Jeopardy tend to, in dollar value of their wagers, when they're like betting on their answers, will bet lower. And when I read that, I didn't, it was not an assault on Jeopardy. It wasn't an assault on any of the awesome, smart minds on the show. What happened for me is I said, okay, now that I know that, right? If I were on Jeopardy as a woman, I would say to myself, I know that I'm thinking that I shouldn't bet higher. What I'm actually going to do here, I'm going to lean into that identity note, and I'm actually going to consider the ways that that is showing up in my work. And so the two things I think I'll share are that, on the one hand, being able to say that identity is showing up is relevant. It's relevant in conversations like I See Me, and it's relevant in our conversations in our psyche as funders to simply name, going for the bigger ask and understanding the psyche behind why or why not that is the case. And I think it is both. I'm recalling something that I want to say I pulled from Fast Forward around like the nonprofit judo, but there's something about this being both a strength and a hindrance that is relevant to our shared work as fundraisers. It's a strength because each of us has an identity that shows up when we get onto a pitch call, which allows, in my instance, the ability to put my shoes and put myself into the shoes of those who we're supporting and advocating for. I'm not speaking, third and fourth degree about what it's like for a student to see themselves in their classrooms. I was once a student in a classroom who wanted to see herself reflected. And I think that brings with it an ability to talk about the issues in a more complex and nuanced way that our funders are looking for when really shopping around as to what is the foundation or what is the organization that I'm really wanting to bet on as a part of my gift.
Thank you. And we are going to open it up for questions in just a couple of moments. But first I want to ask, you've clearly like come to this, I've developed, you're a talented fundraiser, but on day one, it probably didn't feel like that. What were the kinds of things you learned as a new fundraiser that you wish you had known?
So I want to pay a ton of gratitude to our full team. We're a team of about 10 fundraisers on DonorsChoose. And our team believes, and you'll hear me say I, when I say I, I'm thinking community, right? Community of DonorsChoose fundraisers, we, which is, we believe, right, that sales learning at DonorsChoose is ongoing. We are learning every single day about what it means to be a good fundraiser. And knowing that today, I think it would have been helpful in my brain to think that through on day one, which is day one, pitch one is a learning conversation, and pitch number 500 is the same. And our team has actually brought on a sales consultant, right, who used to work, and she's amazing, she used to work in enterprise software sales. And what she has done with our team is, one, we treat it like a true sales team. So our fundraising, despite being nonprofit and for social good, we consider ourselves sales folks. And by working together and honing our sales skills and our strategy, we have a shared language that truly is impacting the work that we do. And I think in terms of day one tool today of my fundraising work, I want to give an incredible amount of credit to the power of technology in this space. As part of our ongoing sales learnings, we do leverage technology and AI to become better fundraisers. So to give you an example, we record all of our calls with our partners, with our partners' permission, of course, using this technology platform that attaches to all of our Zoom calls, right? So if I'm on a call with partners, it's the DonorsChoose note taker is right there on the call. And what that AI is doing is it's helping us to pitch better. It's helping us to think about how to think through tough questions, how to truly, it's almost like watching game day tape on a Monday after a Sunday football game, right? It's really excruciating to watch the mistakes you made, but over time, we're getting stronger as a sales team and getting more skilled in pitches and using this technology. So I think that coupled with some of the skills that we're learning around like asking tough questions and having the courage to avoid sticky situations down the road have really helped us to think through the ways that we're evolving as a sales team and growing every single day.
Did the technology surface any common mistakes?
Yes. Okay, I'll share one. I'm blushing. I don't know if y'all can tell. One is the amount of time that we as fundraisers at DonorsChoose talk in comparison to our donor. Like literally just the AI just like picks up Steen's voice and picks up Shannon's voice. And at the end of the call, it says, Steen, you talk 75% of the time, Shannon 25% of the time as funder. That could be a mistake, right? And it picks up immediately on where were the moments in which we could have listened more or asked more questions. So that's one that we really lean into, which is purely going and taking a peek at our just literally how much we talk.
I have made that mistake. I get it. It's a hard one. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other core skills that you've picked up? And then I'm going to open it up to questions. Are there any other skills that you've picked up in your years of fundraising that you wish you'd known?
Sure. I think one is like learning a bunch from the no's, maybe even more so from the yeses, right? So a lot of us here may have maybe a couple of like war stories where you end the call or like you get the email back and the answer from the funder is no, thank you. And the inclination I think I have felt is like cringe, close the email, I'm bummed. And I just can't imagine like, how is it that, did I ruin the pitch? Like, why wasn't there a fit? And there's something at DonorsChoose in terms of our leaning towards what it is that we can learn from the no's, even more so than the yeses from our partners, our prospective partners. And often what happens is at DonorsChoose, when we get a no, and this is, our business development team is so great at this, we'll follow up, right, to ask why. Like, can we take 15 minutes? And if you've got a second, can you just tell us more of what led to your ultimate decision to say no to this fundraising moment or to this initiative? And what that allows us to do is actually not only leverage the technology we talked about with that AI, but also now we're amassing some data, right? We're amassing data that says, we got 10 no's from consumer packaged good companies. Something's not registering with the way that our pitch is registering with our CPG companies. And that's an example. And the same goes for, are there particular funders who are hearing our message in a certain way? And do we actually need to begin to understand the way to deliver our messaging based on the data from our no's? And what happens, I think it's a lot of, what's fun is that sometimes our funders will say, the answer is no, so glad you got on the call to ask why. I can think of 2 or 3 funders who I can connect you to. Let's go that route instead. So it really becomes an opportunity to do new business development with our funders, even if they say no.
Not everyone here has a 10-person team, right? Like that is the fantasy that someday they will get there, but that's not where they are today. Is there anything that you've learned working on a 10-person team that you feel like in particular you could apply if you're a single fundraiser or new to fundraising?
So our business development team is a team of about 3 or 4, right? And then we have a partnerships team, and the partnerships team are the folks who focus on growth of our currently existing partners, and I sit on that team. And then our new business team, which is about 3 folks, so a smaller team, they focus on getting the new folks in the door, right? And one thing that I've learned by watching them, right, is that we don't burn ourselves out, right, by trying to boil the ocean. It's truly a divide and conquer. And we map out goals for 1 year, just one. And that's where, again, our data comes in, because we are thinking about looking at our existing funders and discovering, what are the underlying characteristics of those companies and foundations, right? Is it that There are particular industries or companies that support you. Is there a size, right? So for us, that sweet spot is consumer packaged good companies or consumer facing companies with $100 million of revenue, right? So there we have it of a vertical that we've got teams who can divide and conquer and say, we know that's a sweet spot.
I really appreciate that, because I feel like so much of
Yeah.
the wisdom around fundraising is that like you need a 5-year plan. And at the end of the 5-year plan, you should know like your money should be growing 20% every year. And like, that's not always how the world works. And sometimes you have to just listen to your donor partners before you know. I feel like a year is like a really helpful framework.
We indeed set out a year of our work. And that isn't to say that folks aren't have a great amount of foresight into what's ahead. And I think that comes to a lot of the reading that we do with lots of publications, right? Our Inside Philanthropies and Chronicle, just having a good knack for what is happening in this space. And I think that really, I'll add one more and I'll look to you, Shannon, if there are additional questions, but being really clear, I think, especially if you're part of a smaller team, maybe you're the sole fundraiser who's like taking on the charge of great work to support the good that you're doing, being really clear on the why and the mission and your personal why. I've once heard our CEO say something like, I mean, every pitch conversation can probably boil down to one sentence. And if that isn't, if you don't have that sentence, it likely means that we're not ready to go into the conversation yet with the funder if we can't boil it down to the one thing we want to get across. And so I say that just with a great amount of respect for folks who are a part of smaller teams. And I can think of organizations that have 200 plus fundraisers that may have a whole different strategy for how they're thinking about their giving and their projecting. But just my nod is to folks who are thinking through the ways in which they are goal setting and dividing and conquering as a team of one and using data to leverage exactly how it is that you'll do that.
That's so helpful. Okay, if these are new fundraisers, seasoned fundraisers, what are some like key takeaways that you want these lovely people to know about fundraising so they can go into the world and do it better with an equity lens?
Yeah. Okay. So I have I've got some tactical things that when I think about like nitty gritty at DonorsChoose that like we just like adhere to that I can spew off, and then you can tell me, Shannon, if that feels aligned with what you're thinking too, as someone who I also know is an amazing fundraiser. So a couple things, right? One is when it comes to getting back to funders, we believe in getting back to a funder within by email within 24 business hours, that is. And the idea there is really about our, we're sort of a fast moving techie nonprofit, and the swifter the email response, in our view, the less perfect and robust it needs to be, especially if you're like hopping on a plane, I guess a virtual plane now, and like getting off the meeting, it's like thanks so much, that was awesome, more coming in 3 weeks. At that point, like it's done, it's over, and the touch point is there even following the meeting. So that's one thing, Shannon. Another is what I mentioned before, just a broader takeaway of really following up with all of the no's that you get. And so I'm thinking about, Emily, your question just now, but having a track record and tracking the trends of why you're getting no could actually really be illuminating to just what it is, the type of funder, the type of product, and your own pitch that is informing whether or not you're successful. I can think of just a few more big takeaways. Consider creating campaigns. I'm thinking, Emmanuel, you had a question about the 4 work streams, right? Consider moments in which we're able to rally funders around a thing or a cohort, even by giving them their own sort of like their own flash, their own logo, but having them aligned toward that thing. And for us, that's Teacher Appreciation Week, back to school season, moments in which the all call makes a ton of sense for our pitches. And I think to the question, I think it was Pinky who asked questions and Taryn around tailoring your pitch to your funder. That is somewhat of a controversial thing to say, but I stand by tailoring what you're saying to the person that you're talking to, and where possible, nix the stale pitch deck that may or may not speak to the philanthropist who has 10 minutes to hear about the thing that you're up for. So I guess all of that really boils down to, Shannon, we think a lot of DonorsChoose about having a 1-sentence reason why folks should support classrooms. And it truly is like, if you believe, like we believe, that a kid's zip code should not determine if they get stuff and that they can learn, then join us. And that is what we do on every single pitch call. So having that one sentence is typically what we do no matter what.
I love it. Thank you so much. One of our mantras at Fast Forward is people give to people. And, people connect with other humans. They connect stories that are very human. And so tailoring a pitch, especially if it happens within 24 hours of the first email, I think is really, really helpful. And I can see why so many people give to you. Thank you for being so generous with your time and your story and your incredible wisdom. This is a very scary thing for everybody. Even as a seasoned fundraiser, some days I wake up, I'm like, oh, Nelly, I'm not sure I want to. So I appreciate your enthusiasm for the art and the science of fundraising. And I'm so grateful that you were willing to share some of your tips and tricks with us today.